This mini lesson is about the reflective statement and its role in the written assignment. Your learning target for this mini lesson is I understand what the components of a strong reflective statement include, and I have some of the tools I need to fix my reflective statement. First, think about where the reflective statement goes in your paper. The reflective statement is criteria A. You should have written about it based on an interactive oral that you presented or someone else presented. The information in it does not need to connect directly with the theme or main thesis that you're looking at in your written assignment. Instead, since it was written before you started drafting that written assignment, it's a little bit less formal. Its goal is to show how your thinking changed about those cultural and contextual considerations. It's about you demonstrating your thinking in a more visible way about the author and the content that you're looking at. If you look at the question as we've looked at some paper 2 prompts, you see that the main components that need to be addressed within the reflective statement are your understanding of cultural considerations and contextual considerations before that interactive oral, and then what you understood afterwards. That's where we have that verb developed. And then your final piece needs to be what next. If you look at your rubric, you'll see some, quote, look fors on that written assignment rubric that give you an indication of what else you might look at. So the first thing to do with your reflective statement is make sure that you have this prompt. That's the question that the reflective statement is answering, and it's expected that you would put that at the top. Then your next piece needs to give a clear lens to what the interactive oral was about, who the author was, maybe even the name of the text here. This student got a 3, earned a 3 on the reflective statement and doesn't have it here, but that's an important piece to include. So we have the specific focus, we have that it's on the interactive oral presentation, and when you look at yours, you want to ask, did I clearly and definitively state something about the interactive oral presentation that I participated in? Do I have something about its focus and then something that we discussed or learned? Then you want to include something that you learned. In this case, this student both identified something that was learned, but also a mode of thinking or pre-existing thought patterns that the student might have had. Here we see it's judging Hikmet's ideology and worldview. And this shows that there's going to be a change of thinking, whereas previously the students might have had a misunderstanding, preconceived notions about Marxism and communism in this case, or some other fundamental either gap in your knowledge or misconception. This isn't the place where you would say negative things about how you think. You don't want to write to your IB examiner that you thought narrowly about people or you had prejudices or biases or things like that. This is more an opportunity to say, here are some things that I learned and I hadn't known about them before. Then the next point that you make is, because I learned this, I then understood these other pieces about the text and about the culture from which the text originated. And then finally, by the time you get to the end of that reflective statement, you want to have a statement that looks a little bit like this. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but you want to show how you would apply it. So again, those pieces are: address the prompt directly, give a clear and definitive statement or two about what happened during the interactive oral. What happened does not mean what activities you did, but what information was communicated, what you thought about, and perhaps what you discussed. Then you have a paragraph or two, short paragraphs because it's only 300 to 400 words, but you have some statements about, because you learned X, your knowledge base grew, and therefore you can apply that knowledge base to your further studies, something else that you're going to be looking at within the text. Perhaps it would be, I can apply this framework to the rest of Neruda's poetry, or the next collection of Neruda's poetry we're looking at. Or perhaps you would say, I need to rethink what I understood about X character and go back and reread some of those sections. Last but not least, While first person is okay, and you can see that the language is not very complicated here, you want to make sure that you don't have any obvious grammatical issues. You want to make sure that the title of the work is italicized, that you've capitalized the author's name, that you have included other salient details that show that you read the text and were fully engaged with it, and that it's just basic good writing. You don't want to have a lot of errors. Those would be the things that might detract and pull you down to a 2. I hope this has been helpful and that you're able to make these changes in your reflective statement.